Hi everybody, it's Mr. Williams. We're talking about capitalization rules today. This slideshow was created by Mrs. Ellis and Mrs. Reyes, but I've adapted it for our class. But just note the rules are the same in any English class you go to. If you ever need to rewatch this video, feel free to click that Bitmoji in the bottom right corner. But let's get started. So you should be aware that there are 3 times that you capitalize. The first time is one you're probably familiar with. It's the start of a sentence, the first word of a sentence. So anytime you start a new sentence, make sure you capitalize that first word. But also if you have the start of a quote within a sentence, that kind of counts as almost a sentence within a sentence, you would capitalize that as well. The pronoun I is also capitalized, so like may I go with you? If you're using I to refer to yourself, you're going to capitalize that in every circumstance. And although it's only 2 words, this is going to cover really the rest of our slideshow, and that's proper nouns. Proper nouns we will distinguish on the next slide. So if you know proper and common nouns, the big difference is that a common noun is kind of our general word for a person, place, thing, or idea, whereas a proper noun would be the specific person, place, thing, or idea. So if you look at the right, we have the screenshot from Khan Academy. And so like we might have as common nouns cities, frogs, rivers, mountains, and we could point to tons of those. But when we refer to a specific city that has a name like Chicago, or a specific frog like Kermit, or just in any case, a specific name for a general noun, we're going to capitalize that. And you have to be careful here because some people say things like, okay, well, a van is a type of car. Do I capitalize van? No, because you can say, look, there's a van. But if you're talking about like a Ford Focus, for instance, a type of car, or go to a type of van or a type of truck, that's when you're going to capitalize it. So you have to use a little bit of your own thinking here, but anytime it's a specific person, place, thing, or idea, that's where we're going to capitalize. So let's talk about a few different scenarios where you're going to find a proper noun. So one of the first and most common ones here for proper nouns is going to be names and people's titles. So when you're talking to someone whose name might be Joseph, Karen Albright, J.K. Rowling, you're going to capitalize those. Those are people's names. And likewise, if someone has a title to their name, your teachers are a great example, whether it's Mrs. Reyes or a Mr. or a Miss or a doctor, you're going to capitalize that if it's in front of someone's name. Principal Cruz or Attorney General Michael Foster, Senator Kennedy, Sir Elton John. When you see one of these words in front of someone's name and it's referring to their title, that's going to be capitalized. That's part of their name, so you need to keep that in mind. Now, similarly, another title someone might have is a family relation. So if it's before a name, like you see here, Aunt Susie, Grandpa Frank, Uncle Joe, all those words are the titles of these people, at least to you. So you capitalize those. And similarly, and this goes with the last slide as well, if you are addressing someone by their title, and in this case, relatives, are you coming to my party, auntie? Hi, mom and dad. Hi, grandpa. That is your name for that person. That is their name. So just like if you use their first name, Joe, Frank, or Susie, you're going to capitalize, in these cases, auntie, mom, dad, and grandpa. Now, these words are not going to always be capitalized, as you can see at the bottom. For instance, in the example, I am seeing my aunt, or I am seeing his aunt, or your mother is awesome, her mother is awesome. We are referring there to the common noun, someone's aunt, uncle, grandparent, whatever it might be. If we're not referring to them by the name that we would call them, that's going to be lowercase. So in these cases, if you're not referring to their specific name or the title, or using their title as their name, you're going to keep that lowercase. Just keep that in mind. Now, for number 4, and this goes with names as well, sometimes people have things after their names, whether it's an MD, a senior, a PhD. Sometimes at the start, maybe once again, we had J.K. Rowling earlier, S.E. Hinton, they take their first few initials and make them just the letters. Whenever you have an abbreviation attached to a name, you're going to at least capitalize the start of that. Things like senior, junior, PhD, you can see are a little bit different. You can always look that up, but at least the first letter will always be capitalized. And just to keep this rule going, all abbreviations are like this, so whether it's NASA, KFC, ASAP, you're going to capitalize every letter in that acronym there. That's going to be part, or that abbreviation, that's how that works. Number 5, we're covering a lot of things here, but just note that days, months, anything cultural with religions, anything like that, that's going to be capitalized. You're going to capitalize Tuesday, January, those are specific days and months. Arbor Day is a specific holiday. For Buddhism and Christianity, names of religions are capitalized. The sacred writings for them, the Bible, the Torah, the Quran, those are capitalized. And similarly, we kind of covered religious days and holidays, same rule, Yom Kippur, Easter, Christmas, and then also note that if you're talking about specific people, that also refers to God. So God in certain religions Allah, Jesus. Now, be aware for God, it's only if the name of the God actually is God. You can even see in my last bullet point that the second God is lowercase. So if you're with a religion or talking about a religion that has multiple gods, you're not going to capitalize the word God unless one of those gods is actually named that. Please note also that we talked about days and months being capitalized. You do not capitalize seasons. Fall, spring, summer, winter are lowercase unless they're part of a title like SummerSlam, Spring Fling. If it's an event name with those words in it, of course you capitalize it. But just talking about seasons, we keep those lowercase. For nationalities, races, and languages, just be aware that if you're referring to a country, or nationality or anything like that. You can see the list here, American, British, English, French, just jumping down, African American, Indian, Hispanic. Those are all going to be capitalized. They're referring to, in a lot of these cases, real places that are specific proper nouns for countries. Things like Britain, England, keep that in mind. We're going to capitalize those things. So there's nothing really else to add to this slide. I guess one sillier thing I'll mention is that if you're talking about a fantasy novel or a sci-fi, and you're talking about alien planets, like a good example from Star Trek would be Klingon, you capitalize that. That is the name of a specific nationality or a specific race. So just keep that in mind that if you're ever referring to that for any of these groups and any other nationality, race, or language, it's going to be capitalized. Now, titles is tricky. This is one that we'll probably cover a lot all year as we go through our stories, but just be aware that all the important words in the title are capitalized. The best way to put this is all the verbs, all the nouns, all the adjectives, all the adverbs, basically anything that isn't a short conjunction or preposition or article is going to be capitalized, although you'll notice at the bottom I mentioned that unimportant words are capitalized if they're the first or the last word. So a great example is in the first example for books, Of Mice and Men. We wouldn't normally capitalize the word of if it was in the middle, but because it's the first word, we're going to capitalize it. We would do the same thing if it was the last word. Same with A Midsummer Night's Dream. A is not normally capitalized, but it is in this case because it's the first word. The best example is the poem. You can see it in red, Snow in the Suburbs. Notice we capitalize snow in suburbs, nouns, important words, but in and the are lowercase. Yet, if you look at the movie, television show example, the works of art example, the is capitalized. Once again, it's the first word of the title. So just keep that in mind. This is tricky. This takes a lot more practice. I won't throw any difficult ones at you for this, but just note the main words, the most important words, are we capitalize in a title. Whether it's a book, a play, a song, a work of art, be aware of that. Specific courses in school. This is definitely tricky when we're talking about middle school and before that because we only capitalize course titles, meaning titles of classes, if it is the specific name of the class. So Mrs. Reyes teaches English Language Arts. English Language Arts is a fancy name for your English class. I am taking Algebra 1 next year. That's a fancy title for your math class. Your classes in middle school are really titled things like, math 1 dash and some set of numbers. So that would be what you'd capitalize, but you don't see that, so it gets a little tricky. Now, to be clear, you do not capitalize when it's the general subject unless that subject should be capitalized in the first place. So, for instance, I'm heading to history class. History class is lowercase. You're just describing the class you're going to by its subject, lowercase. However, I am learning a lot in English and French. English and French aren't capitalized because that's the title of the class or they're more important, but English and French, as you saw earlier, are nationalities and specific languages in this case. So we're going to capitalize this. The same rule applies for animals, like if you have a golden retriever, you keep that lowercase. But if you have a Siberian husky, Siberian's going to be capitalized because that's referring to a location, Siberia. So just be aware of that sometimes you can get a little tricky with these rules, but you can find the logic in them if you kind of think about it. Speaking of that, number 9, we kind of covered this a little bit with nationalities, but specific names of places, geographical names, are capitalized. So we've kind of, in a sense, covered countries here, maybe continents. But towns, cities, states, bodies of water, islands, mountains, planets, none of these words would be capitalized in general. They're common nouns. But if I'm talking about a specific mountain, the example from the slide way back when was Mount Kilimanjaro, we capitalize both those words. If you're talking about a planet, whether it's Neptune or any of them, that's capitalized. Pick a city like Boston or a town like, let's go with Norfolk, that's capitalized. All these things are capitalized when it's a specific example of any of these things. Now, this goes with everything, like transportation, companies and brands. Like if I'm on a ship, That's different than being on the Titanic. Titanic is a capitalized word. USS Arizona is capitalized. It's a specific name for a ship. Whether it's a Jetta or a Tesla or a Ford Focus, all cars, which is cars is lowercase, but the specific names are capitalized. And you can see another example, Air Force One, MBTA commuter rail. The specific names for transportation are always capitalized. And just to add it to this, any company and brand is too. Whether that's Dell, IBM, Pepsi, Nike, Hostess. This includes for brands, your sports teams, your bands that you like to listen to. So all that stuff goes under kind of trademark or copyright or whatever you want to call it. Specific names of companies, though, specific names of brands, and likewise specific names of transportation, all are capitalized. Only a few rules left, so sorry that we're taking so long with this. Oh, before I forget, sorry, these are some examples, though, to show you the difference between common and proper nouns. I'll just pause here for a second so you can see the difference. I'll do one example. Let's just do the top one in green. I love hiking in the mountains. There's mountains in a lot of places. That's going to be lowercase, but the green mountains are beautiful in the fall. Notice fall is lowercase because seasons are lowercase. Green mountains are a specific mountain range, so we're going to capitalize that. And you can pause here if you want to look more, but I'm going to move to the next slide. So we're going to keep covering this kind of difference between a common noun and a proper noun here. Like Eiffel Tower is a specific tower. We capitalize Eiffel and tower. The Statue of Liberty is a specific statue. We capitalize statue and liberty, not of though, because remember that's not an important word. It's one of our kind of prepositions. And the Louvre, which is a museum's lowercase, but we're going to capitalize that L there because that is a specific example of museum. All right, two tricky rules to end here, and then we're done. So for specific events and periods in history, this is going to come into play a lot when you're in history class, obviously, but you capitalize the specific names for important or notable events and time periods in the world's history. In other words, if there's a place, an event, a time period in history that's been named because of how important or significant that event was, we capitalize it. The Middle Ages, the California Gold Rush, the Crimean War, the Renaissance, all capitalized because these are important events that got given a name because of their importance to some degree. This goes for every single war, especially, and just keep that in mind. Now, please note on the right, I put this important kind of little, let's call it a blurb here, that I intentionally on this slide did not capitalize the word the in front of three of these, and I'll be honest, the fourth one's an error. The there should be lowercase. But just to be very clear on this, when you're looking at an event in history, we're talking about unimportant words. It's the Crimean War. The doesn't have any kind of relevance to the title. It's just kind of we need a word in front of it. Same with California Gold Rush, Middle Ages. You don't need the word the there. So if you're saying I'm doing a report on the Middle Ages, you're going to keep the lowercase. Middle Ages is the name of the event or the time period in this case. So just keep that in mind. Don't capitalize the word the when talking about a specific event unless the word the is the first word in the sentence. And also be aware of this, that when we're talking about notable and important events, things like 8th century, 17th century, a year like 1984, they're all going to be lowercase because those aren't really specific names for anything. That's just how we keep track of time in our world. So keep that in mind. Don't capitalize 17th century or 18th century, any of those things. They're not proper nouns. They're just kind of like how we keep time. So just be aware of that. We left the one of the more difficult rules for last, so bear with me here. Directions. So one of the trickier parts of figuring out capitalization is words like north, south, west, east. When do I capitalize those? When do I not? If you are giving directions, meaning you're telling someone where to go, you're going to keep that lowercase. So in the example here, you need to go north, then take a left. North, I'm telling you which direction to go in. So whether I said north, south, east, west, I'm kind of just basically pointing, you go that way. I'm just giving you directions. I'm not saying a specific location. That's going to be lowercase. But when you're referring to regions, that's when you capitalize because that is the specific name of a location. So the example here, in the Northeast, we love the New England Patriots. In the South, they probably don't. The South is referring to a specific region of the country. Northeast is referring to another region of the country. We capitalize that. The same applies when it's in front of something. If I said the Northeast United States or the Southern United States, I would probably capitalize that too. This can get a bit tricky depending on the rules you're following for whatever grammar rules you end up using in your specific jobs. So I'm not going to go into too much detail there, but just note in general, if you see the word a direction in front of a location, whether it's a state or a country or a continent, you're probably going to capitalize that, but there are some exceptions, so just be aware of that. That I'm not going to be too cruel about this in middle school, but you do need to be aware that sometimes you might want to just double check: do I capitalize, say, Southern California versus Southern Utah? There might be a big difference there. But that's it for this slideshow. You can use this whenever you want. I'm going to be throwing some timestamps in the description of this YouTube video, so if you just have to review a specific rule and don't want to watch the entire thing again, you'll have that at your disposal. And other than that, have a great day, and thanks for watching.